Good morning. Senator Jack Reed and I have just returned from a congressional delegation trip that I had the privilege of leading to Afghanistan and Pakistan last week. We wanted to report to the people in our states and to the people of the country what our takeaways were. Let me briefly touch on what I learned and what I believe, and then I'll turn it over to Senator Reed. As we all know, in Afghanistan, we are drawing down our forces on a 2014 timeline, and it's a timeline that I support. The question we need to be focused on here at home is how we do that. And I would also say that the goal is to have an Afghanistan that can defend its own borders, govern its own internal affairs, and that Afghanistan is not a safe haven for groups like Al-Qaeda that attacked us on 9/11. The strategy to reach that goal is subject to a lot of debate, and it's an appropriate debate, an important debate. But I support in general the President's strategy. We rushed into Iraq. Both Senator Reed and I thought that was a bad idea. We worked to not rush out of Iraq. You could argue that we've neglected Afghanistan for those many years we were in Iraq, and I think for me it's very important that we don't neglect Afghanistan as we turn Afghanistan back over to the Afghan people. My observations in Afghanistan is that there are some significant security gains, but there may not be peace when we leave. We need to have a plan B in place if there's no peace deal between the Afghan government, the Taliban, and Pakistan by 2014. We're focused, and we need to continue to focus on training the Afghan forces to take responsibility for their own security. I think the exit strategy really involves the Afghan security forces taking responsibility for their own internal security. Finally, we can't do this without Pakistan, and although this is not easy for me to say, it does feel that at times like Pakistan is playing both the role of fireman and arsonist in Afghanistan. We must hold Pakistan's feet to the fire about the safe havens it is giving to the Haqqani network and other Taliban elements. I emphasize this, as I think did Senator Reed, to General Kayani, the Chief of Staff of the Pakistani Army. And I think we both feel that if there are attacks on U.S. or Afghan forces from Pakistan, significant attacks, then all bets are off. And we did everything we could to deliver that message to the Pakistani leadership. So with that, let me turn the lectern over to Senator Reed for his comments and insights, and we'll take questions.
Well, I want to thank Senator Udall for leading this delegation. It was a very effective way to get firsthand impressions and information about the current situation in Afghanistan and Pakistan. With respect to Afghanistan, all of the people we spoke to noted progress with the Afghan National Security Forces. The Afghan National Army is becoming more effective and credible at the small unit level. Obviously, there still has to be much work to improve their staffing abilities and their leadership abilities at the battalion, what they call Kandak level and beyond, to the corps level. And indeed, we understand, too, that they will need for going forward support by enablers, helicopters, intelligence, ISR-ish platforms. But what we've seen over the last 2 years particularly has been significant improvements in the quality of their units and their ability to participate with American and NATO forces in the fight. One other area in terms of Afghan national security forces is the police. That is a huge challenge. There is, again, growing evidence of progress, and one of the areas that was particularly highlighted was the growth of the ALP, the Afghani local police. These are essentially village defense forces that are operating directly with United States Special Forces troops, and it is a way to provide security at the local level, the grassroots level, that seems to be getting more and more traction, and it complements efforts to try to reform and professionalize the Afghani National Police. But there's still work to be done, obviously. The issue with respect to corruption in Afghanistan is one that's always front and center in terms of the ability of the government to provide basic services. We are partnering with the Afghani government to begin serious efforts. We have been doing that for years, but serious and effective efforts. One area is to look at the borders, the customs forces, to try to work closely with our Afghani counterparts to make sure that these forces are effective. General McMaster's, who is very experienced in terms of counterinsurgency policy, has been in Afghanistan now for, I think, several years, is working closely to develop a combined effort to try to develop a much more coherent and much less corrupt operation along the borders. And that is a first step among many steps to try to improve the issue of governance in the country. Politically, Afghanistan faces national elections in May of 2014. So that process of structuring elections, of actually assisting the Afghanis, since we can't presume to structure the elections, but assisting them in terms of both a peaceful and representative transition from President Karzai to the next president is going to be an important objective. It is still sort of on the horizon, but our diplomats have to begin to focus on that effort as we speak. And then there is, of course, the reconciliation and reintegration process. This is critical to our efforts to reposition our forces and to allow the Afghanis to move forward. This is one of the issues that is under serious consideration, requires regional collaboration. The Pakistanis have to be a positive force, as well as the other regional powers. As you know, I think today or tomorrow in Istanbul, there's a regional conference where they'll begin to talk seriously about how they can affect a regional solution through reconciliation, reintegration. Reconciliation is, as I understand it, is that sort of the national level, the major political actors coming together. Reintegration is going on right now. That's the local level. That's individual fighters coming off the battlefield, giving up their weapons, coming into essentially pledging their allegiance. That's taking place. Both of these issues are still at a very formative and early stage. Now let me briefly shift to Pakistan. Pakistan plays a critical role in what goes on in Afghanistan and the ability of international forces to conduct, and I think the strategy is sound, conduct our transition in 2014. There was agreement, I think, when we talked to General Kayani, that the Pakistanis had to do more to help squeeze the Haqqani network, to help interdict those elements that are going into Afghanistan. I think Secretary Clinton's visit was very, very effective. It changed dramatically the mood. The mood was very pessimistic towards the United States in Pakistan. That was a result of many incidents. We had a situation where someone who has been publicly identified as a CIA operative was involved in a confrontation in Pakistan, Raymond Davis. That caused a setback in our relations. We obviously, the Pakistanis were shocked, I think, by the raid we conducted against Osama bin Laden, a necessary operation. So the relationship had, I fairly been on a downward slope. Secretary Clinton's visit, along with Director Petraeus and General Dempsey, sort of reset the stage. We sense that there is now a renewed interest for the government of Pakistan to cooperate with us. And the real question is the conscious, concrete steps they'll take. I think the words are right, the sentiment is right, but there has to be real steps going forward to help us not only squeeze the Haqqani network, but also to go after other elements within Pakistan that are directly engaged in activities in Afghanistan. And the next few weeks will demonstrate whether or not we can work together effectively with the government of Pakistan to put real pressure on. a final point I make in terms of the overall peace process is that my sense is that the government of Pakistan has always been sort of hedging its bets about who's going to govern in Kabul, and therefore they've tolerated the Quetta Shura. They have links with, or at least contacts with, some of these insurgent networks. Essentially, if we're going to have and I believe we must have a political solution, the government of Pakistan has to identify groups that are constructive players in the political process in Afghanistan and support those constructive forces for some type of political solution in which all the various groups, the Pashtun, the former Northern Alliance fighters, can come together with a stable and effective government. Thank you.
Senator,
Yes.
one for each of you. Senator Udall, you mentioned the need for a plan B in the event the reconciliation reintegration process hasn't yielded a positive outcome by the time we leave.
Yes.
Can you flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah, I think Plan B is tied to the training of the security forces. Senator Reid mentioned the successes with the ALP, the Afghan local police. I think we can't do enough to invest in their army and in their police forces. In particular, the police forces need additional attention because they have direct contact with the population in these rural areas where the Karzai government at times is at best barely visible and at other times actually works against the interests of the local people, whether consciously or not. So that really is a part of Plan B. The other elements of Plan B would include, as Senator Reid mentioned, the Istanbul, Bonn, and then Chicago conferences, which will take place over the next 8 months, involving the regional powers. That they all live in that neighborhood. They're going to have a real stake in the security and stability of Afghanistan. So those are elements in Plan B. They're certainly they are certainly interlock with and buttress our core strategy. But nobody can predict that this is going to turn out exactly like we want it to. But there are key security concerns we have here in Pakistan, although a vexing ally is an ally with whom we have to continue to work. They have, it's a very unstable part of the world. They have a nuclear arsenal that should be a real concern to us. And for all those reasons, we have to stay engaged.
And Senator Reid, you said that the next few weeks would be critical in determining whether Pakistan is going to be a productive partner. What are you looking for in the next few weeks? Why that time frame specifically?
Well, I think they indicated, General County indicated, I think very appropriately, that they have to develop effective plans. They have to have goals and objectives that are consistent with their national security as well as helping us. That takes some time, but not indefinite time to put together. So I think this is a phase where they're looking at what they can do. But unless there's some affirmative steps going forward in a reasonable time, it might not be weeks, it might be a little bit longer than that. Unless there's some definite steps, then the fear that I would have is that we're going to get back into, talking but not doing, and we're at the point where we need action, not just, not just agreement. We need action, and the action we understand is limited because of the limitations that the Pakistani military has in terms of the types of operations it can conduct, but certainly in terms of disrupting the movement of couriers to the Haqqani network, helping us to effectively take down some of the networks that are cross-border networks that create IEDs. All of that can be done without a direct military confrontation between the Pakistani forces and Afghani forces. And so those are the types of steps I think we have to see. And frankly, they'll probably be invisible to most people. But they have to be very real, and they have to contribute to our efforts in the region.
Your impression is that Pakistan won't do anything if it isn't invisible, that there won't be any open
kind of operation?
I think the first thing you have to recognize with Pakistanis is that they have done some things over the last several years for their own interest that are somewhat remarkable. If you 2 or 3 years ago told me that there'd be major Pakistani forces in the Fatah, I'd say no, they're never going to go there because they see no interest there because it causes them political problems. They will point out very accurately that they are losing significant casualties on a regular basis. They are concerned about IEDs because they're not only going off in Afghanistan, they're going off in Pakistan, and they're going off with some frequency. So there is, I think, a concern that they have that is legitimate. It's self-interest as well as a broader interest. But the one reality is that a one-on-one confrontation with some of these insurgencies could really tax their capacity, their military capacity, and they will indicate that. But that does not, to me, that might be a reason not to choose a more direct confrontation. But you've got to do these other things, and you've got to do them quickly.
The Pakistani Army and civilian sectors have incurred, what, Senator Reid, 30,000 casualties over these last couple of years, and they've lost a significant number of mid and high-level officers in these fights in the western areas of Pakistan. So they've made sacrifices. They've been fully engaged. Their forces are not postured and trained to fight counterinsurgency campaigns. So they've had to reconfigure, learn quickly on the fly, and they're extended. Some would argue overextended. Having said that, I still believe that, as Senator Reid made the point, I made the point, Secretary Clinton made the point, I think General Petraeus made the point, that now's the time to act to squeeze the Haqqani network. These safe havens are making it very difficult for us to prosecute the war in Afghanistan. And in the end, this is about Pakistan's own self-interest as well. These elements can't continue to exist in western Pakistan as they threaten the stability of the Pakistan government and therefore the Pakistani people. So this is a situation that demands immediate attention, and that was in part the reason for our visit to Pakistan. In Afghanistan, we spent a lot of time on the ground learning about what's happening there. I sit on the Intelligence Committee. Senator Reid and I spent quite a bit of our time being briefed by those members of the intelligence community who are working hand in glove with our military and our civilian presence there in Afghanistan. And the results are very, very significant. We see that in the good news stories out of Afghanistan, that we're securing quite a number of areas in Afghanistan and training the Afghan security forces.
Senator Reid, can you talk at all about what exactly you saw in Pakistan that made you think that the atmosphere between the two countries is improving? Are there any concrete steps in the offer, or is this just a sense you get from talking with officials?
We met with the Foreign Secretary, and I specifically raised, along with Senator Udall, the issue of whether or not these insurgent groups would be considered by the Pakistani government as strategic assets or strategic liabilities. And for the first time in my recollection, and I've been there, I'm guessing, about 10 times, they quite clearly stated, he stated, that these are not strategic assets. Now that is a change in verbiage and tone, which is I hope portends a change in action. When we spoke to General Kayani, again, I've had the occasion to meet with him on a number of occasions. He seemed to be much more engaged, much more willing to build on this meeting with Secretary Clinton particularly and try to look for ways in which to be helpful. But the test will be the positive, constructive actions that they take, and we understand there are limitations on what they can do. And indeed, as suggested by my previous comments, most likely these will be not dramatic, overt steps, but helpful steps in terms of providing us sort of assistance in disrupting the network, their financing, their ability to move. And I must say also, too, we have taken the fight to the Ghanis on the other side of the border in RC East, operation that have undergone in the last few weeks, where we've had significant operations against the Haqqani network. So we're putting pressure on. We're hoping that they provide us as much counter pressure in terms of the Haqqanis as they can generate.
Yeah, I want to be careful with what I say. As you know, you follow the Intelligence Committee, and in general, I would say yes. The conflicts between our two countries are fully vetted and published. The many ways in which we work together don't get quite as much attention. Having said that, as Senator Reid said, we have been through a difficult period, and we're not necessarily out of the woods yet. Our country has very legitimate concerns about our soldiers and our civilians being attacked from the safe havens in Pakistan, in Afghanistan. But we can't afford to let the relationship further deteriorate. And that was, again, in part the reason that Senator Reid and I went to Pakistan to deliver that message. But that doesn't mean that we can accept what's been happening up to this point.
Well, we've seen some Haqqani network hits lately by
Yes.
unattributed explosions.
Yes.
Did any of that CIA drone program activity come from Pakistani shared intelligence?
The attacks we're seeing in Kabul now are pretty classic attacks when an insurgent group is under great pressure in their strongholds, such as Kandahar and even RC East, to use specifics in Afghanistan. Insurgent groups often will try and then conduct high-profile attacks to seize the propaganda advantage. But it actually shows a sign of weakness in traditional insurgencies. So these attacks are serious in Kabul, and we shouldn't take them lightly, and we see the loss of life on the part of NATO forces as well as Afghan civilians. But this does show that we're pressuring the insurgents in ways that we haven't before.
I apologize. Unattributed explosions is the CIA's tongue-in-cheek way of referring to their drone hits in the Fatah. So
You're talking about the drone attacks? Yeah. What's your?
I was wondering if any of the recent hits that have taken out Haqqani network leaders in the past few weeks, has that come from shared Pakistani intelligence? Have they shared anything that has led to some?
I don't know that I'm at liberty to share any specifics, but we continue to have a strong relationship with the Pakistani intelligence agencies. We'd like it to be stronger. We'd like it to be more disclosive. There have been some shortcomings. There have been some missed signals, but all in all, we continue to cooperate with them, and they cooperate with us in many ways that I can't share with you. I don't know if Senator Reid would have a better way of saying it or a way in which to.
I always defer to the Intelligence Committee when it comes to these issues.
Can't blame me for trying.
That's the better way to say it.
I think we're going to assume that the Pakistanis are going to work with us in good faith, that they understand our real concerns, that if they can't use their military or their counterinsurgency units in the Fatah, that there are other steps they can take. They could cut off access to funding that the Haqqani network has right now. They could reduce the mobility that the Haqqani network has in Pakistan. They could share additional intelligence with us as to the movements of the Haqqani network, Those are some steps that they could take that don't put their troops and their forces at greater risk or extend them in ways that aren't acceptable to the Pakistani government and Pakistani military. So we're proceeding on the basis of the commitments they made to us. But the clock is running. This isn't something that can wait for months or years. So action needs to be taken in weeks, days and weeks, I should say. By the way, let me. I think Senator Reid would join me in acknowledging the contribution that the Japanese government is making. I think, in particular, in training police forces, if I'm accurate, and the Japanese people are putting significant resources into Afghanistan. We thank Japan for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.